Something is shifting right now. And whether you follow astrology closely or not, you might already feel it. There are moments in life when things move slowly. Plans stay stuck, decisions get delayed, and it feels like the universe is asking you to wait a little longer. But then there are other moments, rare ones, when the energy completely changes. Suddenly, things begin to move. Thoughts become clearer. Feelings you've been ignoring rise to the surface. And the part of you that has been quiet for a long time starts whispering, "It's time to do something." That's exactly the kind of moment we're stepping into right now. Venus is moving into Aries, and while that might sound like just another astrological transit, the truth is that this particular shift often creates a powerful surge of momentum in people's lives. Venus is the planet connected to desire, relationships, creativity, and what we truly value. Aries, on the other hand, is bold, direct, and fearless when it comes to taking action. When these two energies meet, something interesting happens. Desire stops sitting quietly in the background, and suddenly it wants to move. You might notice an urge to start something you've been postponing. Maybe it's a conversation you've been avoiding, a project you've been thinking about for months, or even a decision that keeps returning to your mind no matter how many times you try to ignore it. That restless feeling isn't random. It's the kind of inner push that appears when life is gently nudging you forward. And here's the thing, most people don't realize about moments like this. They don't last forever. There's often a small window where courage feels easier, where opportunities appear a little faster, and where one simple decision can start a chain reaction that changes everything. In today's video, we're going to talk about what Venus in Aries actually means, why it tends to create this sudden urge to act, and how you can use this energy instead of letting it pass you by. We'll also explore the biggest mistake people make during this period, something that quietly blocks momentum before it even begins. So if you've been feeling like something inside you is ready to move, ready to change, or ready to finally take a step forward, this video might arrive at the perfect time. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from, or what part of this message resonates with you the most. I always enjoy reading your thoughts and hearing your experiences. Now let's talk about what really happens when Venus steps into Aries, and why this energy tends to awaken a kind of courage many people didn't even realize they had. To really understand why this moment feels different, we need to look at the two energies involved, Venus and Aries. When these two forces meet, they create a very specific emotional atmosphere that people tend to feel in subtle but noticeable ways. Even people who don't normally pay attention to astrology often sense that something in their motivation, desires, or relationships suddenly shifts. That's because Venus and Aries influence two very important parts of human experience: what we want and how boldly we're willing to pursue it. Venus in astrology represents attraction, love, beauty, connection, and the things that make life feel meaningful. It's the planet that governs our relationships, our creative impulses, and the values we carry deep inside. Venus shows us what we naturally gravitate toward: the people, experiences, and goals that bring a sense of joy or emotional fulfillment. When Venus energy is active, it often highlights the softer side of life: affection, appreciation, creativity, and emotional connection. It's the part of us that wants to experience life fully, not just survive it. Aries, however, operates in a completely different way. Aries is known as the first sign of the zodiac, and its energy is all about beginnings, courage, initiative, and forward movement. It doesn't wait around for the perfect plan or the ideal moment. Aries energy is instinctive. It acts first and figures things out along the way. This sign is associated with boldness, leadership, and the willingness to step into something new, even when the outcome is uncertain. Where other signs might pause and analyze every possible scenario, Aries tends to trust its instincts and move. So when Venus moves into Aries, something interesting happens. The gentle, reflective nature of Venus suddenly mixes with the bold, action-oriented energy of Aries. Desire stops being passive. Instead of quietly wishing for something, people start feeling an urge to actually go after it. Feelings that once stayed hidden beneath the surface begin to demand attention. Situations that felt stagnant may suddenly feel like they're asking for movement. This is why many people notice a shift in their emotional energy during this transit. There's often a sense of urgency or restlessness that appears without a clear explanation. Someone who has been hesitating to speak up might suddenly feel the courage to say what they've been holding back. A person who has been thinking about starting a project might finally feel ready to begin, even if the plan isn't perfect. Conversations that were avoided suddenly feel necessary. Decisions that once seemed difficult begin to feel more obvious. One of the most noticeable effects of Venus in Aries is how it changes the way people express their desires. Normally, people may spend a lot of time reflecting, analyzing, or waiting for the right moment. But Aries energy shortens that waiting period. It encourages people to trust the first spark of inspiration instead of dismissing it. That doesn't mean people suddenly become reckless, but it does mean the distance between wanting something and taking action often becomes much smaller. This transit can also bring a strong sense of personal independence. Venus usually emphasizes connection with others, but Aries reminds us that our own desires matter just as much. It encourages people to ask themselves a question they may not have considered in a long time. What do I actually want right now? Not what feels safest, not what other people expect, but what genuinely excites or inspires you. For some people, this realization shows up in their relationships. They might suddenly recognize feelings they've been ignoring or understand what they truly need from a connection. For others, the energy appears in creative or professional areas of life. Ideas that once felt unrealistic suddenly start to feel possible. Projects that were sitting on the back burner begin calling for attention again. What makes this transit especially powerful is how quickly it can create movement. Aries energy works fast. It doesn't spend months building up momentum. Instead, it tends to create small but decisive turning points. A single message, a short conversation, or one unexpected decision can start a chain reaction that leads to completely new opportunities. And that's really the heart of what Venus in Aries represents. It's the moment when desire stops sitting quietly in the background and begins asking for action. It's the point where inspiration turns into initiative and where people feel a little more willing to trust their instincts than they normally would. One of the most interesting things about this period is that many people don't just notice a change in their thoughts. They feel it as a kind of inner pressure. It's not always dramatic, but it's noticeable. There's often a sense that something in life is ready to move forward, even if the circumstances around you haven't visibly changed yet. Plans that once felt distant begin to feel more immediate. Feelings that were easy to ignore suddenly demand attention, and decisions that seemed easy to postpone start circling back into your mind again and again. This is why many people describe this kind of energy as a push rather than a gentle suggestion. Aries energy doesn't sit quietly in the background. It's direct and forward-moving by nature. When it mixes with Venus, the planet connected to our desires and relationships, it tends to bring hidden emotions and unspoken intentions out into the open. Things that were once comfortable to delay may suddenly feel impossible to ignore. You might notice this in small but meaningful ways. Maybe you've been thinking about changing something in your life for a long time, starting a new project, reaching out to someone, making a career move, or finally addressing a situation that has been quietly bothering you. Normally, it's easy to push those thoughts aside and say, "I'll deal with it later." But during moments like this, that option starts to feel less comfortable. The idea keeps returning. The feeling becomes stronger. And eventually, the mind begins to realize that staying still might actually require more effort than taking a step forward. This internal pressure can sometimes feel confusing, especially if nothing obvious has changed around you. From the outside, your life may look exactly the same as it did yesterday, but internally, something begins shifting. A new level of awareness appears. You start recognizing desires that were previously buried under routines, responsibilities, or hesitation. And once that awareness appears, it's difficult to pretend it isn't there. That's why moments like this often feel like a turning point. They reveal the gap between where you are and where part of you wants to go next. Sometimes that realization feels exciting. Other times, it feels a little uncomfortable. Growth often begins that way, by making you aware of possibilities that require courage to pursue. Another reason this period can feel intense is because Aries energy tends to highlight truth. It removes some of the hesitation that usually softens our decisions. Instead of endlessly weighing every possibility, people suddenly feel drawn toward what feels real and immediate. The mind becomes less interested in theoretical scenarios and more interested in actual movement. This doesn't mean every impulse needs to be followed blindly, but it does mean that the emotional signals people receive during this time can carry surprising clarity. When something genuinely matters to you, Aries energy tends to amplify that feeling. It turns quiet interest into curiosity, curiosity into motivation, and motivation into action. Interestingly, this push doesn't always show up as excitement. For some people, it appears as restlessness. They might feel impatient with situations that used to feel normal. They might start questioning routines that once seemed stable. It can even feel like life is gently nudging them to outgrow certain patterns or environments. And that's an important part of this energy to understand. The push isn't meant to overwhelm you. In many cases, it's simply highlighting areas of life that are ready for movement. It's the moment when the comfort of staying the same begins to fade, and the idea of trying something new becomes more appealing. Think about how many major life decisions begin. Rarely do they appear out of nowhere. Usually there's a long period of quiet thinking before the moment arrives where something inside you finally says, "It's time." That moment, the shift from thinking to acting, is exactly what Aries energy tends to activate. For some people, this might mean speaking honestly about something they've been holding back. For others, it could mean taking the first real step toward a dream they've been quietly carrying for years. And sometimes, it's even simpler than that. It might just be the moment someone decides to stop ignoring the voice inside them that has been asking for change. One of the most fascinating things about this period is how strongly it highlights the power of your first instinct. Most of us are used to questioning ourselves. We have an idea, and almost immediately, our mind begins analyzing it. We weigh the risks, imagine different outcomes, and try to predict whether the decision will work out the way we hope. In many situations, that kind of careful thinking can be useful. But during moments like Venus in Aries, the energy tends to work in a completely different way. Aries is deeply connected to instinct. It responds quickly, almost automatically, because it trusts the initial spark of awareness that appears before doubt has time to interfere. That first reaction you feel, the quick thought, the sudden idea, the urge to reach out to someone or start something new, often comes from a place that is surprisingly honest. It hasn't been filtered through fear or over-analysis yet. It's simply the part of you that recognizes what feels right in the moment. The problem is that most people rarely act on that first instinct. Within seconds, the second voice appears. The analytical voice starts asking questions. What if this doesn't work? What will people think? Maybe I should wait until I have a better plan. Suddenly, the simple idea becomes complicated. The momentum that existed for a brief moment begins to fade. This is exactly where Venus in Aries creates an interesting opportunity. During this time, that first spark tends to carry more energy than usual. It's almost like catching a wave at the perfect moment. If you move with it, the momentum builds naturally, but if you hesitate too long, the wave passes and the moment disappears. Think about how many meaningful experiences in life begin with a small instinctive action. A conversation that turns into an important relationship often begins with someone deciding to send a simple message. A creative project that eventually grows into something significant often starts with a quick decision to begin, even when the outcome is uncertain. Many opportunities don't reveal themselves until after the first step has already been taken. This is something people often forget when they wait for complete certainty. Certainty rarely arrives before action. In fact, it usually appears afterward. Once you start moving, new information appears, new connections form, and new possibilities become visible. The path becomes clearer not because you analyzed it perfectly, but because you began walking it. That's one of the hidden gifts of Aries energy. It teaches people that progress doesn't always require a flawless plan. Sometimes it simply requires willingness. A willingness to begin before everything feels perfectly organized. A willingness to trust that you can figure things out along the way. Of course, this doesn't mean acting recklessly or ignoring common sense. The goal isn't to rush into every impulse without thinking. Instead, it's about recognizing the difference between intuition and fear. Intuition tends to feel simple and direct. Fear, on the other hand, usually creates endless layers of hesitation. During Venus in Aries, many people notice that certain ideas keep returning to them. It might be something small, like reaching out to reconnect with someone. It might be something bigger, like starting a new direction in their career or creative life. The idea appears once, then again, and then again. Each time it carries the same quiet spark of excitement or curiosity. That repetition is often a signal that your instincts are trying to guide you somewhere meaningful. And the interesting part is that even small actions can keep that momentum alive. You don't need to make a life-changing decision overnight. Sometimes sending a message, writing down an idea, or taking the first small step toward a goal is enough to activate the energy. Once movement begins, the next step tends to reveal itself naturally. This is why so many breakthroughs during this period appear sudden from the outside. People might look at someone and think their success happened overnight, but what they don't see is that it often began with one quiet decision. One moment when someone trusted their instinct instead of dismissing it. One of the most overlooked aspects of this energy is that it doesn't stay open forever. Venus in Aries tends to create a brief but powerful window where motivation, clarity, and courage rise at the same time. During this period, people often feel a sudden spark that tells them it might be the right moment to act. The strange part is that the signal is usually very clear in the beginning. There's a feeling of excitement, curiosity, or even nervous anticipation that appears almost out of nowhere. For a moment, everything feels possible. An idea feels exciting instead of intimidating. A decision that once felt overwhelming suddenly feels manageable. People feel ready to send the message, start the project, or take the step they've been thinking about for a long time. It's a rare moment when instinct and opportunity seem to line up at the same time. But here's the pattern that repeats again and again. Many people feel the spark, yet they hesitate. Instead of acting while the momentum is strong, they tell themselves they'll do it later. They convince themselves they need a little more time to think, a little more clarity, or a slightly better moment. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. After all, taking time to think through a decision can feel responsible. The problem is that momentum doesn't always wait for perfect conditions. Aries energy moves quickly, and the motivation it creates tends to fade if it isn't used. That feeling of courage that appeared so clearly one day might feel much weaker a week later. The excitement that made an idea feel alive can slowly turn back into doubt, and the opportunity that seemed within reach may quietly drift away while someone waits for certainty that never fully arrives. What makes this situation particularly interesting is that people rarely notice the moment when the window closes. There's no dramatic signal. Nothing obvious changes in the outside world. Life simply continues moving, and the chance to act passes quietly into memory. Days or weeks later, a person might suddenly remember the moment when they almost took a step forward. They might think about the message they nearly sent, or the idea they almost began working on. And that's when a subtle feeling of regret can appear. Not a loud or overwhelming regret, but a quiet realization that they had an opportunity to move in a new direction and chose to remain where they were. That kind of regret has a unique quality. It isn't about failure. Most people are surprisingly comfortable with failure when they know they tried. The heavier feeling comes from knowing they didn't act when the moment asked them to. It's the memory of standing at the edge of a possibility and deciding to wait until the energy that created that possibility had already faded. This is why recognizing these windows of momentum can be so powerful. It reminds people that timing plays an important role in progress. Certain moments naturally support movement. They make courage feel easier and decisions feel lighter. When those moments appear, even a small action can carry far more impact than it would during an ordinary day. Venus in Aries is known for creating exactly that kind of timing. It doesn't guarantee that everything will work perfectly. Life rarely works that way, but it does create a period where taking initiative tends to lead to faster responses and clearer outcomes. Sometimes the opportunity is as simple as speaking honestly with someone who matters to you. Other times, it might be starting a project you've been imagining for months, or finally pursuing a goal that felt too uncertain before. The important part isn't the size of the action, it's the willingness to move while the energy is still present. Because once you take that first step, something interesting often happens. The fear that once seemed so strong begins to lose its grip. The path that looked complicated starts to simplify, and the momentum that felt fragile becomes surprisingly real. One of the most subtle yet powerful obstacles that can quietly kill the momentum of Venus in Aries is overthinking. Almost everyone has experienced it at some point, and it often disguises itself as responsibility, caution, or even intelligence. On the surface, analyzing a situation, weighing every possible outcome, and preparing thoroughly can feel smart and reasonable. In most areas of life, that approach may serve you well. But during a Venus in Aries transit, overthinking becomes more of a hindrance than a help. Aries energy thrives on instinct, courage, and action, even small actions. It asks you to move, to participate, and to trust your intuition. When you start dissecting every possible scenario or imagining all the ways things could go wrong, the natural spark of motivation that initially appeared can slowly dissolve, leaving hesitation, self-doubt, and stagnation in its place. Overthinking usually starts innocently. You feel a pull to do something that matters, a message you've been holding back, a new project you've been planning in your mind, or a conversation that's been weighing on you. At first, the impulse is simple, clear, and exciting. There's curiosity, a sense of possibility, maybe even a little nervous excitement, but the overall feeling is positive. Then the mind steps in. Suddenly, the questions begin to multiply. What if the timing isn't right? What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if people judge me? Maybe I should wait until I know more, until I'm more ready, until I have a perfect plan. Each individual question may feel reasonable, even necessary, but collectively they create a fog that clouds your clarity. The original spark that prompted action becomes buried under layers of doubt, and the momentum that was once natural and flowing begins to fade. The deceptive part about overthinking is that it often feels productive. We tell ourselves that analyzing every detail is smart, that preparation will protect us from failure, that caution is the responsible choice. But during a period like Venus in Aries, where energy is designed to reward movement and initiative, overthinking does the opposite. It keeps you frozen. It prevents progress. Opportunities pass quietly while you wait for the perfect conditions that may never arrive. The longer you wait, the weaker the spark of courage becomes, and eventually, the energy itself begins to dissipate. Venus in Aries doesn't wait for perfect clarity, and it doesn't reward hesitation. It responds to action, even small action, taken in alignment with genuine desire. Understanding the difference between fear and intuition is key to overcoming this trap. Fear often feels loud, repetitive, and consuming. It presents endless scenarios of what could go wrong, generating paralysis disguised as careful planning. Intuition, on the other hand, is quiet, direct, and subtle. It's that internal nudge that feels aligned, honest, and exciting in a way fear never does. During this transit, your intuition is a compass pointing toward opportunities that are meant to be explored. Choosing to act on these instincts rather than getting lost in fear-based analysis allows you to tap into the natural momentum of Venus in Aries. The beautiful thing about this energy is that progress rarely requires monumental action. Small, deliberate steps are enough to keep the flow alive.